more than 80% of the world's payments are still being made with cash and checks, which is an amazing, amazing thing. You know, we're talking about new forms of payments on the web. 80% of the world's transactions are still happening the old-fashioned way. Why is that? Is that a big opportunity for you?
It's clearly the biggest opportunity for us. When we think about growing our business, we don't think about MasterCard, American Express. We don't think about
Not a share game.
Other branded payment competitors. We think about how do we electronify commerce? How do we find those places where consumers are still writing checks, using cash, and how do we move that into a digital world? And in the US, it's about form factor, it's about marketing, it's about giving them new ways and places. But outside the United States, in Latin America and in sub-Saharan Africa, it's about infrastructure, it's about addressing the challenges of the informal economy, it's about supporting government initiatives that would try to bring consumers into the financial mainstream. Around the world, we have enormous growth opportunity, and most of it is about moving cash to electronic.
One question I have about that is, if you think about parts of the world where there's no infrastructure that, like what as we would know it, right? There are no ATM machines, there are no point of sales terminals, people are not carrying around plastic cards in their wallets, they may not be carrying wallets. There's a pretty good chance they've got a mobile phone, but that's kind of where the infrastructure ends. And so I wonder, on the one hand, I think maybe it is an opportunity for you to try and address that market, but on the other hand, it also feels like an opportunity for a new player to come in, perhaps a new paradigm for how to do small transactions, particularly for peer-to-peer. I want to pay you $20 and I don't have the cash to pay you. How do you see that playing out?
There's lots of things in that question. So a couple things. If you go back and we think about our business around the globe in almost 200 countries, we think about it based stage of market development. And so while the US is by far the most developed market in which we operate, if you think about where the US was 30, 40, 50 years ago, there was a proliferation of payment card programs that were issued by retailers, issued by local banks, people writing checks. The problems with many of these payment forms is that they weren't interoperable, outside a certain geography, outside a certain merchant location, and they weren't scalable, and they were less convenient. You have the same thing happening in mobile around the world. We have today over 100 local mobile-based payment schemes that are operating in certain geographies in Africa, in the less developed world, in Latin America. None of them are really taking off because the technology doesn't scale. They're not ubiquitous. They aren't interoperable with across the different schemes. So we like the innovation, we like the development, because ultimately it's a platform where we can come in and provide the scalability, the interoperability, and the ubiquity that isn't achieved in some of these local programs by partnering with local banks, local governments, mobile network operators, and we think that there's a lot that we can do to add value there. And you're right, ultimately mobile is going to be the game changer because they don't have the infrastructure and aren't going to have the infrastructure. They're in many respects going to leapfrog the telecommunications infrastructure that you have in the developed world.
And I wonder a little bit whether we've had there's been a lot of discussion about using mobile devices to do payments. There's been some discussion about using NFC, near field communication technology, basically a kind of short range radio system to do that. Lately, there seems to be a little bit of a pullback from belief that that's the answer. But in one way or another, this concept that you can stop carrying around cards and you make transactions with a mobile phone. And if you think about the opportunity in the emerging markets, it almost feels like maybe they end up leading the way in a way that, and we've seen that happen in certain other places in mobility in particular, where technology isn't always adopted first in the West.
Right. What will happen, and what we're seeing already, is we don't see people waving phones at the point of sale. in the emerging markets and developing markets, what you have is low functioning phones. You have payment schemes that are transacting through SMS, and they work very well. So what you'll see is a representation of an account in digital form on a mobile phone. You essentially have a virtual stored value account that can be funded through top-up minutes. It can be funded through electronic benefits that a consumer might be receiving from an employer or from the government. And that'll be the account that they manage on their mobile phone, like in the developed world, we manage our account with our bank and a demand deposit account.
Are you necessarily the logical party to take control of that market, or might it not be the local carrier, for example, where the wireless carrier has a billing relationship with those?
So we're not a fan of controlling markets. We like competing. We like innovating. We acquired a company last year, Fundamo, based in South Africa, that operates in more than 40 countries. This virtual prepaid account that operates on a mobile phone, and we do believe that there will be lots of innovation, lots of competition, lots of cooperation. The model that exists in the developed world, where a consumer goes into a bank and gets a card and uses that card in a merchant location that's been terminalized, is not how things are going to play out in the emerging markets. You're going to have the consumer look to their mobile network, look to their government agency, look to their employer, hopefully look to a network like Visa for these values. So we do need to think about distribution and servicing the customer differently. At the end of the day, as long as it's reliable, as long as it's ubiquitous, as long as it's convenient, we think the consumer will adopt it. And many of the assets that we have, the capabilities and know-how we have, we think we can do it as well, if not better than most folks. So, but we are thinking about the partnership structure differently. Banks are a wonderful distribution partner for us in the developed world.
Right.
They are not necessarily the distribution partner for us in the emerging markets.